Welcome to the DEAI News Roundup. Today we have Evin McMullen, co-founder and CEO of Billions, an identity verification network for humans and AI agents. Thanks for being here.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you guys so much for inviting me.
Well, it's good to have an expert in the house. We're going to talk about some of our recent stories that we published on DEAInews.com. And then at the end, we'll hear a little bit more about Billions and why this all matters to you very personally.
Certainly.
So let's get into the news. So we published a piece about USDC dominating agent payments. So USDC, the U.S. digital currency of Circle, is currently settling 99% of all agent-to-agent payments on X402, which is the protocol that a lot of people are using right now. But a new report from Shoal Research says that dominance is pretty fragile. Coinbase controls the clearing layer. Stripe is building alternatives. Tether also has a stablecoin. So why does it matter what stablecoin agents are going to be using and settling transactions with? I mean, we've had this new kind of world in the United States open up for stablecoins with the legislation that passed last year. I mean, I ask myself, what stablecoin should I use and why does it matter? What does this matter for agents? Evin, what's your take?
So historically, the goal with stablecoins has been to increase deposits and liquidity on chain. And as you know, Tether and Circle have quite an early lead here. But everyone is entering the stablecoin race. So the only way to lead to a coherent outcome, a coherent experience with many stablecoins in the market is if we have a clear interoperable identity solution to determine who's an agent, who's a human, and who they're accountable to. This is especially important in the decision between which stablecoin to utilize because, of course, each has different policies around governance, especially when it comes to compliance. And we've seen the disparity in that action between, for example, Tether and Circle in the way that they handle doing things like freezing tokens in instances of illicit activity. So with everyone issuing stablecoins on different infrastructure, different backends, using different messaging protocols, the only way that this all works together is to take care of identity such that we can identify agents, who they're accountable to, the human beings and organizations they're associated with, and then make that interoperable across different stacks.
Oh, surprise.
Evin,
You wanted to talk about identity, Evin. But Brad, I want to take that to you. What do you think about this? Because you've had a front seat to the rise of stablecoins and the adoption. I really want to know, why does it matter what stablecoin is being used by agents?
Well, I think it's interesting if you trace the arc of crypto, and there was this race to, first there was Bitcoin and then there was Ethereum, and then people started to launch tokens on top of Ethereum. And then people came up with this idea of a dollar pegged token, and that was a stable coin. And it was just a crypto thing, and people were using it in payments for crypto. And now in the age of AI, here come the agents. And now you have very serious payments players from the traditional world, Stripe and Visa, and they're all planning to use stablecoins for their agent payments. And so, and traditional commerce is going to want to be doing agentic commerce. And so now all of a sudden the stablecoins are become a much more important thing. And I guess to your point, Evin, the sort of enterprise infrastructure is not really there yet, right?
It's certainly diverse, fragmented, and early in many of its implementations. And so, I think the way to think about stablecoins in this context is as machine money. They are uniquely well suited to the capabilities and requirements of agentic interaction. However, the overlap between ownership of different parts of the stack. You noted earlier Coinbase and their ownership and contributions not only to the stablecoin USDC, but also to payments and identity protocols like X402 and 8004. And so it doesn't surprise me that the house that built the agent stack, at least a popular one in the crypto space, is also responsible for the currency of choice of those agents. But I think we're going to see further customization and opinions, especially from these more institutional players as they start to enter the chat. But this yet again underscores the importance of interoperability, of governance, and of securing the value of those stablecoins, as we've seen other stablecoins depeg in the past to, very negative consequences.
Yeah, I mean, we're still spending money out of our wallet when we have a stablecoin, right? And to your point, every wallet, your stablecoins are associated with some kind of identity verification or, your financial profile. When we're talking about mainstream adoption of stablecoins, we're already like knocking out half the population. Who knows what we're talking about, right? And then right? They're like, what the hell's a stablecoin? That doesn't sound stable. That's fake internet money. And now like we're drilling down and we're like, what stablecoin does an agent need? And the thing is like, who's an agent? And why? But when we're talking about this, to bring it down a bit, when we're talking about an agent with a wallet, that could be you controlling your Claude, right? To purchase and buy things.
So I think it's happening. It's happening more quickly than we expect, but the switching cost to adopt this new way of payments and way of interaction is a little bumpy. Juniper Research notes that in the next year or so, the value of the agentic economy anchored in stablecoins is likely to exceed $8 billion, I believe, looking north of $1 trillion here in the next few years. So this implies quite a lot of value moving along these rails enabled by agentic actors. However, again, this also, highlights some of the shortcomings in the supply chain between buyers and sellers, between merchants and those who they serve, because, of course, this implies participation of payment processors, of the merchants themselves, the platforms that are receiving payments. I think, one of the unique and interesting challenges is how we reconcile legacy infrastructure, especially in the commerce space, with this new method of payment when questions like compliance come into play.
Yeah, well, I think right now the U.S. government, we can't pass the Clarity Act. Stablecoin passed, and nobody knows what to do with it quite yet. We don't really know how this is going to play out with regulations yet. Because it is just so new. It's a new concept. But I think this industry that we've come from, which is blockchain, is that they do the things and then policy and government always has to catch up, right? And so we are in a very dangerous place where we have like tech companies deciding what's cool now and what's happening. And then we have governments and legislators trying to catch up to us all the time, to be like, oh, can we regulate that? Can we get in there? Or right now, can we hold this so the banks and traditional finance can catch up? Because the traditional finance is behind, right? And we're seeing the slowdown of being able to pass new regulations in the United States because of that. But technology waits for no one and AI waits for no one, as we've learned just in the last 6 months, right? As we've seen all these things progress quite quickly and compound as these models get more powerful. And so that leads us to kind of our next story, which is about Cloudflare. So Cloudflare isn't a crypto company, but they just launched stablecoin wallets for AI agents. And this has identity handles, spending caps, in theory. No one's used them yet, I believe. Amazon tried a similar thing with Bedrock. And so we have now those big tech companies moving into this space and showing us, I guess, how it's done. Evan, what's your take on this, coming from being a founder to give identity to agents via their humans?
So I think this is a great indicator of progress with organizations that are well established like Cloudflare revisiting their definition of what a user can be in a digital environment.
True. Now
So
it's agents too and people.
certainly. And, I imagine many of your listeners have had the experience where they're visiting a website and a little logo of Cloudflare pops up with a little box to check. I am a human. And so this bifurcates the users of Cloudflare, based experiences into human and non-human. But now we're introducing a secret third thing, a verified AI agent, thus broadening the definition of user types in Cloudflare-enabled environments. So that by itself, though a small note kind of hidden in this announcement, I think is worth highlighting. Beyond that, it's also, I think, a strong indicator that a centralized infrastructure organization is adopting crypto-native rails rather than inventing a net new closed system. And so this implies the desire to participate in a broader open payments ecosystem. So, it pairs quite naturally with protocols like ERC 8004, which is sort of a registry of AI agents. Think of it like an on-chain phone book for agents, as well as, various different identity, reputation, and validation registries that can interact on-chain. So, practically speaking, a $10 virtual wallet budget is enough for plenty of micropayments and experimentations because the average X402 transactions are quite small. But I think this remains in the sandbox in the world of experimentation because many aspects of a fully fledged wallet and payment experience have not yet been released. So Cloudflare has just announced a number of these potential features, but we don't yet know exactly how all of them are going to work. But I think sort of lastly, a tension worth exploring here is that in this context, identity disclosure is optional, and so this does not solve the problem entirely for merchants who may still face anonymous agents, concerns around compliance, accepting different types of payments, and more. And so the existing Cloudflare bot management stack that we have known for a number of years as users of the internet, I think also is due for a facelift.
I think a lot of people don't realize how big Cloudflare is in your daily internet use. I mean, they're a player.
I think this story is interesting. In some ways, it's the exact opposite of the Circle story from kind of a competitive race standpoint. Here, with the stablecoin, almost all of agentic payments are being done with USDC. They're out to a clear early lead with this kind of key thing that somebody might want to be dominant on. And then with the wallets and the agentic identity, I feel like those are kind of areas that have not been won by anybody yet. There's still kind of a race to get some sort of, early lead in those areas. And I mean, Evan, you named, several of them, and you're in that space too. So, I mean, it seems like it's kind of that, they're waiting on the edge of Oklahoma ready to go out there, whereas the Circle story, they're sort of, it's theirs to lose now.
I think on the one hand, theirs to lose. However, the early lead that we are talking about describes very niche adoption. The experimentation of agent payments, especially the X402 protocol, is championed by innovative developers, small organizations. A handful of institutions are coming to the table, but much of the progress and adoption has really been driven by those at the frontier. And so I think, for the health of the agentic commerce space in the long term, for greater security, and for a more robust digital economy among agents, we are going to want to have a diversity of providers. And that also will help to mitigate any single vulnerability, such that a single issue cannot take down an entire multi-billion-dollar economy. And so I think interoperability with existing legacy systems, meeting the security requirements that already exist today, instead of building on the fringe, is the only way that this is going to become entrenched and legitimate enough to scale.
I mean, do you think it'll be kind of like tribes of people who congregate on certain, wallet identities or solutions? I mean, like if you and if all your friends are using Instagram, then that kind of becomes your main thing. I guess you might have some other things, but you have your main thing. I don't know. Do you see that
So
happening? Where yeah.
Brad, I might push back on that theory a little bit
Okay.
because Instagram
Yeah.
as a walled garden is not natively interoperable with other
Okay. Yeah.
platforms of communication or messaging channels. And so if we see
Interesting.
further
Okay. Yeah.
development with sort of an internal locus of control, different than what we've been talking about with USDC or what we've been talking about with Cloudflare here that are implying an open payments ecosystem. If instead payments, with enabling agents were non-interoperable, were focused on internal environments and required a sort of complete exit of one environment to then enter another, then I think, we might be a little bit closer to the Instagram example that you're describing. But I think perhaps we might even reach a little further back in history and think about things like telcos, mobile, service providers, as well as the everyday hardware we use like our computers. Do I think there's likely to be tribal affinity based on the interface designs, based on regional leadership, based on incentives, marketing, and more? Definitely. But it seems that at least, hopefully, the way forward with agentic commerce implies an open ecosystem where you can connect with or participate across a diversity of players that are not all tied to a single piece of hardware, a single, service provider, a single point of failure.
And so we've seen this in the blockchain space, right? You had Ethereum camp, you had Bitcoin camps. They didn't used to be interoperable, and now they are. There's all these companies that are doing that now. It's been an evolution of the technology. We're still talking about payments essentially on blockchain and having wallets that are linked to identity. But this is so confusing. So I want to back up one step with Evin here, and then we'll move on to our next story. But when you've entered the space with a mission about giving identity to agents and, via their people, right? So I think that that is a hard thing to tell people they need, right? Over the last, let's say, 6 months, we've seen such a rapid adoption of so much technology. AI has gone really fast. Could you just tell me, in the last 6 months, has describing what you're doing for work gotten any easier? And are you seeing more relatable use cases where people are getting oh, my agent needs a wallet and an identity, just like my Apple Pay, let's say?
Certainly. I think in the last 6 months, the everyday, human dinner table conversation has become much more literate. But I also think that the institutional and government adoption of these technologies have started to highlight the gaps, especially around, failures of interoperable identity technology. I think anyone who's had the experience of interacting with an LLM enjoys the early surprise and delight of the experience that is so much more enriched than something like semantic search. But very quickly, as soon as you interact, let's say with a customer service agent or with an agent in a chat environment, it becomes very easy to ask the question, how do you know that that agent is really representing that organization, or that agent is really representing Evin when, it's claiming to represent me?
It is. And just for your normal user, that's just a pop-up on somebody's website, and you trust that is a real representation.
Well, and January, I think you're highlighting actually what what alludes to some interesting legal precedent here. So last year, Air Canada, the airline, incorporated a ChatGPT wrapper, basically a little customer service pop-up window enabled by AI. And as you know, AI is wont to do, it began hallucinating plane tickets that did not exist, plane fares that were not sanctioned by the company. And so this altercation between travelers who thought they were purchasing legitimate tickets because they did so on the airline's own website, and then the airline itself then pointing the finger downstream at the provider of that AI resource ended up in court. And the outcome of that case was that Air Canada was in fact responsible for the actions of that agentically enabled, that AI enabled experience. And so what has come out of that is the requirement of accountability for agents, that the last party or the last brand to touch and present agentic information is likely responsible for that output.
Oh, is that just Canada?
So that is where we have legal precedent right now that we can point to. But in a recent conversation earlier this year with SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce, I was asking her in her personal capacity how she would think about AI agents acting on behalf of individuals or entities. In what she shared, and again, this is in her personal capacity, not the explicit view of the SEC, but that agents, can be considered tantamount to subcontractors. That they are acting on behalf of another entity that is then accountable for their actions. But of course, as we know, accountability requires identity. There is no neck to choke if the neck doesn't belong to a person or an organization with a name, a mailing address, and an ability to contact them. And so this kind of concept of headless, unaccountable AI begs the question, what happens when bots do bad things? So whether it is a question of topping up the wallet and payments needing to come from a source, or a question of, diverting from policy or even transgressing legal boundaries, accountability in the agentic space is vital. We've also seen this arise, in a very real and tangible way when it comes to national security. There are, many folks around the world employed with the access to state secrets who have begun availing themselves of the great resources of Claude and ChatGPT. But of course, when you enter information into those environments, you are using a trust me, bro security policy, meaning that you got to cross your fingers and hope that the information disclosed there is not going to transgress any of the boundaries, data expatriation laws, or security requirements that may already be in place. So exactly as you were noting earlier, that there is a vast chasm in between technical adoption and regulatory oversight, we are seeing that happen in real time with leaders in governments themselves.
Yes, we are. I mean, it is fascinating because this is borderless. This is countryless, agentic payments and commerce. And so how do these things play out? Canada has a precedent. How does that apply? We've covered a story about the rise of this theory of agentic courts to have some sort of like place to, for agents to dispute their own issues. But this is a big legal question, right? Because one, we've seen the lack of ability and different rules in other countries in the European Union versus United States, how they crack down on tech companies, big tech, Google, Meta, and try to regulate them, what they think their purview is. But now if we're setting out all this agentic commerce, how do you give accountability, and how do you have legal precedent and laws cross-border all the way around the world? And when it happens in literal seconds.
Certainly. And, this, of course, is all tied back to payments. And so, regulatory oversight such as OFAC in the United States, which limits the parties that are legally allowed to transact, to interact with one another, implicitly one would think that such requirements will also apply to AI agents and their associated payments, that merchants will need to be sensitive to the source of funds and the types of parties they're facilitating interactions with. But Right now, we do not have a lot of clear guidance because the speed of innovation and adoption is light years ahead of the antiquated regulatory framework being applied to it.
I think that is fascinating. I mean, just the way the banking system works, and if you want to send money cross border, it's going to go through all sorts of checks, and you know, you have to fill out all these forms. I've done it, you know, and it is such a pain to wire money from here to there. And then you're talking about in this current world, X402 is an open standard, and people are sending money over Base. I mean, I guess that's somehow maybe controlled by Coinbase, but it doesn't feel like there's a ton of rules that are enforced that I could tell if I'm sending money to somebody else. Could be somewhere else in the world. My agent is, you know, settling some purchase by X402. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think any of this exists right now. I mean, not that there's not laws that might make certain things illegal, but I'm just saying there's nothing that stops you from buying something from somebody else somewhere in the world using your agent and buying
now,
stuff.
Right. And that was that was the crypto wallet and how people wanted to pay for things for a while, right? That was the like attraction to blockchain and paying with crypto.
So what I will say, Brad, is actually the blocker is not necessarily regulatory, but technical. So if you look at a number of the agentic payment resources, tech stacks that are available to try to, you know, address the classic example, I want my AI agent to buy me a cup of coffee. That implies a supply chain of payment to a merchant and then a receipt of goods and services in the other direction. The you know popular e-commerce platforms, things like Amazon, for example, have taken an early stand of concern and curiosity, let's say, limiting the extent to which agents can browse and make purchases. But then furthermore, there are the simple questions of region, of jurisdiction, of tool set. So in my own experience, I have, for example, tried to make purchases with my AI agent on Amazon. But this, of course, requires an Amazon account, which an agent cannot have. It requires that the API that we're using to call is matching the regional API, or the region in which I am residing and hope to receive those products. And so the simple challenges of account models and of jurisdiction have also proven to be blockers in scaling basic agentic purchases.
Well, we don't have to go so fast, right? Like,
you know, I mean, yes and no, kind of by the same note around Juniper research I cited earlier. So the expectation is that agent commerce transaction value is going to top out around $8 billion by the end of this year, looking like about $1.5 trillion by 2030. But there are other estimates that by 2030, 2031, that's going to exceed $3 trillion. And so while we do not need to move quickly, the capital is moving whether we like it or not. And so it is incumbent upon lawmakers to catch up swiftly, especially in, you know, questions around, for example, taxation on these purchases. How is an agent going to pay taxes? Where does that happen? So I think there are a lot of unanswered questions that are deeply relevant to the unanswered identity interoperability challenge that come down to institutional adoption and regulatory oversight.
That is fascinating. I mean, I guess I would think right now, where are most of the trades, or where is the agentic commerce happening? Do you think it's happening with like stock trades and like maybe like commercial transfer, you know, institution, like for supply chains and maybe in industry? Do you have any idea about where the most agentic commerce is actually happening right now?
So I think those different topics are very promising, but not yet prominent. As of earlier this month, the X402 payments protocol has settled about 161 million on-chain transactions. So that totals around $40 million across 7 blockchains. But the average is about 26 cents in US dollar currency per transaction. So these are not quite microtransactions at fractions of a cent, but are certainly not the big ticket items that you might anticipate from institutional supply chains.
Everyone's just really excited that it's going to happen because we do hear this like at conferences that we all go to, people are all in, there's panels about this, and they're talking like it's here and that grandma's using it already. And that is just not the case.
I mean, we have at Distro have been working on enabling agentic purchases of single premium articles using micropayments. And we've done it, I've done it, and I've basically been buying for myself to experiment and make sure it works. But
hey,
I'm definitely not charging myself taxes, and I want to start selling this article, but I haven't even thought about if I have to charge like Texas state sales taxes or something. I mean, I bet barely anybody's thought about that. It's such a good point.
Well, and it's also interesting when we think about the source of funds here. So, of course, we're sort of, discussing the use of stablecoins. But January mentioned earlier some more, call them traditional institutional players like credit card providers who typically take a hefty fee of 2.5%, which is not reasonable if thousands of transactions are going to be happening, on a daily basis at micropayment scale with this newly envisioned agentic economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, fascinating. So agents with wallets, they need an identity somehow. I'm mildly convinced about this now, right? Because like sometimes I'm like, I don't even want to let my mind go there, because that seems like too much to fill up. And then how is that really gonna interact in my personal life, right? But that's why I'm trying to bring this conversation down to user level, right? Because we're talking about if what industry is doing business to business, but then we're also talking about on a personal level, me paying for a subscription or a micro article or micropayment. The use cases are so wide. And for me, I have to first start thinking about it like my identity, my wallet, right? And my agent is just my smart computer helping me get things done faster,
Yes, your personal butler, but you are still responsible for the actions of that party, or at least that's what it looks like right now.
Well, the problem is if I pay for a cup of coffee with my agent, I need an agent to actually bring me that cup of coffee. So
now we are implying hardware, robotics, intelligent physical transfer, management of hot liquids. There's a lot of complexity that goes into a simple request like that.
It does. Well, let's move into some kind of let's move on to talking about an interview we recently did when we were in San Francisco. So Brad, do you want to set us up for this story? We talked to Ari Juels, who's a really well-known cryptographer and thought leader in this space. And we had a great conversation about what the collision of blockchain and AI is. But he's also a novelist and uses his knowledge of what happens in that world to write basically crime horror novels, giving these technological scenarios, as the plot. Brad, tell Evin a little bit about what we talked about with him, and then let's get dark. Let's go down that rabbit hole.
Well, Ari, I don't know if you've met him. He's a super interesting guy. I mean, he's been involved in the science of blockchain forever with Dan Boneh at Stanford, and involved in that conference. He's at Cornell in New York City, and they put out a paper recently sort of looking at the current state of decentralized AI, and perhaps from a research prism of kind of a review of the current state of technology and what the research is, and thinking about various cryptographic applications that could work in this, convergence of AI and blockchain. And as January said, he is also a very curious, imaginative person, and he is thinking about, okay, if agents were to write their own smart contracts and then they could somehow use smart contracts in crime, and then he's written a novel about this exact scenario apparently, and we
So
did
it's
link,
like it's like a on-chain bounty to do crime, basically.
yeah. So what do you think about that, Evan? I mean, we're just imagining the fringes of agentic capabilities. And I mean, for what it's worth, I did watch Blade Runner Final Cut the other night with my 22-year-old. And these replicants, really, they're not that bad. They just want to live. That's their only thing. They didn't really commit any crimes. They're actually quite nice. They just want to keep living, not dying after this 4-year thing. But anyway, I don't know. What do you think about all this, Evan?
Professor Juels, our Orwellian Cornelian. I think,
That's right.
He's got some valid points to make here, most certainly. But I also think, his statements are pretty obvious. Like, yes, AI is stochastic and non-deterministic. Yes, cryptography and mathematics are deterministic. These are different concepts. So, I guess my first reaction to his comment is like, duh. We are highlighting a gap in between the known evolution of this technology and the tool sets that we have to address potential downside risk. But this is not a technical problem. This is a question of accountability, risk management, and the law. So there is nothing illegal about being an idiot and throwing away money. There certainly is in terms of actively deceiving or violating existing regulatory oversight and requirements.
I think the key here, though, is this smart contract idea that we might explain, because we that's the key there, is self-executing contracts, right?
Yeah,
that's the vulnerability.
Deliberately malicious self-executing code intended to misinform or to harm others for the purpose of profit or chaos. I don't think that this is some wild future vision. I think it is likely happening in the basements of internet connected homes around the world already. And we've started to see that in the race of using AI to proactively identify potential vulnerabilities and prevent crime. I'm willing to bet that that some of the potential risks on the other side are progressing even faster. But I would return to the nature of the question that we're talking about here, right? This is not a technical problem that only needs a technical solution. This is a call to address payment and accountability friction. But that doesn't magically make agents trustworthy or safe, or eliminate the human intention that may come behind it. So I think that guardrails from institutions like Cloudflare technology, like what we work on at Billions Network, bringing verifiability and transparency to the AI processes, are the kind of engineering response that the research community, including Professor Juels, are calling for. Longer term, I think we need better evaluation of agents, more rules around how we can set up who can transact with whom, and consequences for violating those types of agreements, especially as we provide things like on-chain and payments access. So introducing, more robust kill switch technology, more robust verification around counterparty risk for fraud detection. I think that can more easily flag and address rogue behavior. But the hype and hysteria here is driven partly by the futuristic fear and an absence of clear safety measures. While I appreciate the highlight of this challenge and the likelihood that it's already underway, I think to me is not purely a technical question. It is, again, a discussion or opening a discussion around accountability friction and what the consequences are when bots do bad things.
It's true.
Yeah,
He's given me so many ideas for crime, though. Like, writers shouldn't just be allowed to base this off real things.
Well, for those who might be interested in similar work to Professor Juels, I would also point you toward Kai-Fu Lee, who is a Chinese American technologist, previously a leader at Google, whose book, AI Superpowers, about the Chinese and American AI ecosystem development, also is followed up with a number of novellas and sort of creative works exploring what that future can look like. So in the same way that, we as technologists often draw inspiration from sci-fi, I think we also, need to not only define potential problems from that, but also, think creatively about what solutions look like. And again, those solutions are not just technical, they are also regulatory.
Yeah, well said. So as we wrap here, let's dig a little bit more into billions. So we introduced it briefly. You're trying to solve this. You are solving this identity problem. Why is this your mission to do? And when did you see that you needed to start doing this because it's coming?
So at Billions Network, we are on a mission to save the internet in the age of AI by making it easy and straightforward for human beings and the agents who serve them to be identified and verified.
Did you say humans and the agents that serve the humans?
That's correct. Yes, because all AI agents at the beginning of the deployment of an AI agent, there is a person and potentially also an associated organization. And so the deployer of those agents we define as the accountable or associated party. Today, more than half of online interactions come from unidentified, unaccountable bots. And as we discussed in our conversation earlier, organizations like Cloudflare and others are attempting to discern between those different parties. At Billions Network, we make it easy to prove the association of an AI agent back to a real individual human being with certain traits and qualities, such as living in a certain area, not being on an OFAC list, having certain qualifications such as, being over a certain age and more, without revealing the underlying data that makes that qualification so. So I think one of the challenges that we kind of implied a little bit earlier is that there's a lot of information about human beings that is currently regulated, that is very sensitive, and that is required to have a robust and high trust agentic economy. So the way that that data is handled, the way that linkages between AI and humans and AI and organizations occur need to be done very carefully, thoughtfully, and in conjunction with the existing regulatory environment. So at Billions, we make it easy for AI to be verifiable so that you can prove that my agent is in fact my agent. But then also you can discern rules around what that agent is allowed to do. Not just, here is your allowance and you can't spend any more, but here are certain types of data that can be disclosed, that cannot be disclosed. Here is, how you prove what was released to a model in the course of utilizing an agent. And so this is especially important for our partners in the government and enterprise space who are dealing with trade secrets, state secrets, and highly sensitive citizen data.
Yeah. So this is the strange balance between identity verification and privacy for your identity.
So at Billions Network, we are the stewards of the most popular zero-knowledge libraries on Earth. Zero-knowledge, for those who might not be already familiar, is a cryptographic process that allows you to learn something about a piece of information without actually seeing it. So, for example, we can prove using the mobile device in your pocket that you are over the age of 18 if you're an adult who has an ID card or other form of identity document from a government issuing entity, we can prove that you are, let's say, over the age of 18 without revealing your birthday. And so examples like that of being able to prove qualification without handing over all of the underlying data, that follows the principle of data minimization. So making sure that information is shared on a need-to-know basis, because especially in the world of agents, more data, handing them more data does not always mean a better outcome. It can cause hallucination, it can cause data leakage, and when that data is very sensitive, this is, of course, of paramount importance.
Yeah. Brad, what do you think about this balance between identity and privacy?
Well, I do think, you know, what is an agent is kind of maybe where I would start. And going back to the joke about Blade Runner, and I mean, the first...
Oh, was that a joke? I don't remember laughing.
The first generation of these agents, as I see it, is basically going to be like your computer, right? It's just 1 degree removed from you. You're kind of directly controlling it the way you are controlling Claude or ChatGPT. You're typing stuff in or speaking to it, and then it's doing stuff. I think there are people who are spinning up 20,000 agents, and they're all autonomous and they're doing things. And I think that is probably not going to be what most people are doing early on. I mean, I do a lot of coding with Claude, and it will spin up sub-agents that will do parallel tasks, but it's really still just the computer. You know, it's just a different way of computing with natural language instead of it's this thing with the personality, right? I mean, you can give it that, but right now I'm just kind of using it to do stuff. And so then, all right, if I want to buy a concert ticket and I want to use my agent because I don't want to have to go to a website and put in my details and whatnot. I just want it to be easy, and I want to get a concert ticket. And maybe I don't want people to know that, you know, which band I like, or I don't want the the concert venue to be like, oh yeah, okay, he was at that concert. Just give him my ticket and go in and dance and listen, right? I think that's kind of where I'm at in terms of what do you need privacy for? What is the agent for?
Evin, what do you need privacy for? What would you say people need privacy for right now as individuals, and then maybe also as a company, just a higher level?
So I would sort of flip that question on its head. What needs to be disclosed?
No.
And so, you know, at the to sort of call back here to a reference from the 2000s, there was a set of design principles created by Kim Cameron at Microsoft called the 7 Laws of Identity. These are design principles that you apply if you want to minimize risk and harm to human users in a digital system where there are identities, such as accounts. Now, one of those 7 laws is minimum disclosure for constrained use. What minimum disclosure means is that the minimum amount of data should be shared to execute or accomplish the particular use, right? To accomplish the goal. And so oversharing data, sharing more than is required to accomplish the goal, then requires the individual, the participant, the holder of that account to forfeit their ownership of their own information because they do not know if they're going to benefit from sharing it at all. And we've seen time and time again that the over disclosure of data does not necessarily mean something immediately dangerous or harmful. But in a medium term, that data can then be utilized for purposes totally unrelated to the reason it was originally given. So, for example, There are young women who lost pregnancies and in the process of, seeking medical care, have used certain search terms in their computers. You can imagine their surprise when businesses like Target sent them welcome baby packages with sample formulas. That is in one, rather grotesque and inappropriate example, but of over-disclosure of data leading to an outcome that no one asked for in the first place.
Yeah.
I think, we also know that in the environment where, we have AI-enabled systems and also concern around safety for underage users in digital spaces, that things like age verification laws are sweeping around the world right now. There are folks like Larry Ellison who would try to mislead you to believe that there are two ways forward for the internet. One where every website collects your passport, and the other one that is an unusable, cesspool of bots. But I believe that there is a middle path where you can prove qualification in a way that does not over-disclose data, but rather discloses only that which is required, minimum disclosure for constrained use. In a perhaps more real world, and lower stakes example, in the United States, if you want to enter establishments such as a bar that is age-gated, you need to share, for example, a passport or a driver's license to prove that you are over the age of 21 to enter. Now, why does the door person at that establishment need to know whether or not you're an organ donor? Exactly how tall you are, how much you weigh. That is an overshare of information wildly outside of that which is required for
and your
for
home
the particular
address.
use. Exactly.
I don't want them to know how much older I am than 21.
And so, while I do not think that this is a particularly dangerous threat to the people of the United States, I think it illustrates an example of how everyday over-disclosure of data has become normalized, and that this can become especially concerning in digital environments where data such as, being part of a protected minority class can cause discrimination when that data is disclosed outside of the bounds of its requirement.
Those are great examples. And I think the driver's license is the most relatable to people. Other one is that, Facebook, Meta early days, right? Give us access to everything. Okay, because I want this app for free. You know what I mean? So people
if you're,
have
not paying for the product, you are the product.
Okay, scary. Still scary.
An opportunity for us to be more informed.
No, I think it is. And I think, being informed, sometimes can lead to some of these like doomsday or the worst case scenarios. But if you didn't think about it, you can't prepare for it. And as a lot of this kind of abstractly will not touch our daily lives yet, it is touching in smaller ways every day as we do see the tools get powerful in AI, and also that we have to keep identifying our humanness in every app, for every company, for every government agency on an individual basis, right? We're constantly verifying that we're a person. It's part of our daily life now. And so where are we moving to one identity verified, disclosing enough, but that you don't have to do that every time? And maybe part of this is having this identity agent, that you're saying that discloses enough about you that lets it be legitimate for these companies, for government, where you're trying to prove I'm a real person trying to do things.
Definitely. And we've already seen adoption of these types of technologies in institutions and governments worldwide. And so this is not a wild, futuristic sci-fi solution in the hypothetical alone. This is already being implemented at scale. We just have a new set of use cases to bring it to light.
Evin, it has been so amazing to have your views on these really cutting edge new thoughts that are coming through. And we thank you so much for taking time.
Well, I'm so grateful for the discussion today. Always a joy to see you guys. If you're interested in following along with our work at Billions Network, you can find us at billions_NTWK on X. And we are always online. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.